Tom, thank you so much for coming on the Outdoors Fix podcast and inviting me to Knepp.
No problem at all.
Such a special place.
Fantastic to have you.
Can you describe to the listeners whereabouts we're sitting and what we can see around us?
Well, we are sitting in a lovely little wood in the parkland, which is in the middle block of Knepp. It's split up into three, north, middle and south, and we've nestled ourselves down in this lovely little woodland full of Scots pine and oak trees and a small herd of longhorn cattle, checking that we're doing the right thing.
Oh no, they're
Keeping a
about
close eye on us.
50 metres away, and we're sat on a big long trunk as well, which is a nice comfy spot.
Absolutely.
We'll see in 45
better
minutes
chair.
how you're feeling. Yeah. But it is an incredibly special place, and you know, you're the ranger and woodsman at Knepp,
Yeah.
which is a 3,500 acre estate in West Sussex.
Absolutely.
It's a rewilding project.
Mhm.
For my listeners who maybe don't know much about Knepp, can you describe to them what happens here and why it's so special?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, obviously we are on the Knepp estate in West Sussex, beautiful West Sussex countryside, and it's old farms, an old collection of farms. It's a big estate, 3,500 acres, and we're famous for rewilding, which is about putting natural processes at the forefront and allowing natural processes to take place. So that means having things like the right herbivores in here, our longhorn cattle, Tamworth pigs and Exmoor ponies and red deer, fallow deer, roe deer, all at the right sort of levels and all mixing and doing their thing, grazing and poaching the soils and so on. And instead of fields, they have 750 acres to roam around in here, and in the northern block it's 1,100 acres, which is a massive area, and it just allows them to exhibit natural behaviours, go where they want to, do what they want to, and that helps shape the natural world around us, and it's led to so much success, you know, from turtle doves and nightingales and purple emperors, large tortoiseshell butterflies.
Wow.
It's just a fantastic place for wildlife and for people as well. So a lot of people come here for the wildlife, for the natural world, and to immerse themselves in nature, which is fantastic.
So it's working with nature, and this estate about 25 years ago was a very, very different place, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a traditional farm. So, you know, there would be arable crops here, there'd be livestock here, leaves falling on your face, that was good. And it would be like any other farm that you would see in a traditional setting in West Sussex, you know, intensive, working really hard to try and make it profitable and generate food off of the land. And that was incredibly difficult to do, which is why Charlie and Izzy were looking at other options and found rewilding underneath an oak tree, the Knepp oak, and the rest is history, really.
Yeah, so they really have found that since they've worked with nature, the biodiversity here has absolutely skyrocketed.
Oh, it's through the roof. It's through the roof. Doesn't matter what type of wildlife you're after, except for maybe coastal species. We're not doing very well for seals and sharks. But there's a fantastic array of wildlife to see here, at any time of year as well. Even in the depths of winter, you know, you can see muddy Tamworth pigs and longhorns and jays and things like that. So it's just a very special place to be. And it's working so well at a time where we really need to reverse the decline in wildlife species and the lack of biodiversity. It's working really well.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, amazing that you're the ranger here and woodsman, and you've brought me to a wood on the estate, obviously perfect for it.
Absolutely.
So can you tell me a bit about what your job involves, the tasks that you have to do, and maybe a sort of typical week at this time of year?
Sure. So it's a great question because it would be a different answer depending on the time of year. But generally speaking, I think on paper my job is about looking after trees and woodlands, and that's everything from tree safety to tree planting and ancient tree management and things like that. And then I also coordinate volunteers at Knepp, so we've got over 120 volunteers, fantastic people who give up their time to really help us with such a wide variety of stuff. You know, we've got people walking footpaths and checking fence posts and fence lines and engaging with our visitors, helping them stay on the right track or explain what wildlife's going on here, or a bit more about the Whitestalk project or the beavers or the longhorns or whatever it might be. And we've got practical volunteers, which we really launched this year in January, and that's got a practical work programme going where the work is. So that could be in the garden or in the woods with me, or on on the farm somewhere, on the estate somewhere, getting involved. And there's loads of other opportunities as well, everything from ecological surveys. I could talk about it the whole interview, but I don't think that your listeners would want me to do that. So, but yeah, so there's a lot of volunteer management and coordination going on there. And then the other sort of third pillar of my role is about access. So that's maintaining rights of way, permissive paths, everything from gates and bridges to paths and so on. So, and then the sort of the extra bits is the sort of unknown, and you know, every ranger, doesn't matter who they work for or where they work for, will have an unknown part of their job, and that is a lot of reactive work. And it's kind of my job to get involved in everyone's business. So I could be you know, helping Penny and the ecology team out with some fencing or clearance, or getting involved in some surveys, do a dormouse survey, butterfly survey, stuff like that, or helping out with the stockman rounding up cattle, moving cattle and all the rest of it. Endless amounts of work, but that's how I like it. It's nice and busy, you know.
And you're definitely a morning person, aren't you?
100%. Yep, it's a fantastic place to be early in the morning, and I've always been an early riser, so I like to get up before everyone else and make a start and just enjoy where I work as well, and have it to myself for an hour before everyone else turns up. It's always nice, yeah, it's just such a special place to be that, you know, you can't wait to get back in, basically.
I bet. And you've been here since September 2022.
Yes, done a year.
And I want to talk about how you got here in a second, but you're also, outside of your job, you're a volunteer for the Ancient Tree Forum.
I am, yes. So with a couple of chaps, Bob and Andrew, we help coordinate the Sussex branch of the Ancient Tree Forum, pun intended, and we help organise walks in various places in Sussex, looking at veteran and ancient trees, as well as, you know, sort of younger trees as well, looking at guiding them into veteranhood. Yeah, so I help out a bit with that, and until recently I was tree warden as well for my local parish council, but unfortunately I don't have the time to do it all, so I had to cherry pick the bits that I'm better at.
Oh, well, I want to talk about that as well in a minute, but I'd love to go back a bit and find out how this all started. So where did you grow up, and were you outdoorsy when you were younger?
Definitely. So I don't come from a rural background or anything like that. I'm a Crawley boy, but don't tell any of my colleagues. That's a secret. Yeah, no, I grew up in a town not too far from here in West Sussex, and I always used to mess about outside. Always liked being outdoors. Was never inside playing PlayStation or anything like that. And I went to college. I had a sort of, you know, normal education, and went to college and was studying photography and PE and IT and everything I thought I should be, and then it came to applying for university time, and found out that people would pay you to work in the countryside. I thought, I'll have a bit of that. So I went off to Aberystwyth University and studied countryside management. Spent my middle year, my second year at Wakehurst Place as a work experience boy there for a year, and just fell in love with trees, woods and everything nature basically. And then, yeah, sort of managed to carve a career out of it, which is pretty good. I'm very pleased with that.
I bet. So hang on, let's go back a tiny bit then to when you found out they did countryside management at university.
Yeah.
Do you remember the moment that you found out about that course and why you thought, okay, that's for me?
Yeah, definitely. I remember looking through a catalogue of courses that you could go through, hoping for some sort of inspiration, hoping for a spark of something like, yeah, I fancy a bit of that. Got to countryside management. I was like, well, what's countryside management? Don't woods look after themselves? Nature just sort of happens, doesn't it, at the fringes? And, you know, the more you look into it, the more you realise that, you know, actually there's a lot of work out there, and a lot of really interesting, meaningful work. And it just sparked a passion and sparked a real interest. And sort of, yeah, I just thought, I'll get into it. And the more I got into it, the more I got glued into it. And here I am.
Yeah. So after Aberystwyth Uni then, where did you start working? How did you, where was the first paid job that you had?
So the first one was I came out of university, and there weren't many ranger jobs in Sussex at the time, and I managed to pick up an apprenticeship with West Sussex County Council, and help look after sites like the Downs Link and Worth Way, which is long distance bridleways, and West Sussex County Council have a collection of countryside sites that they help look after and maintain. And it was with a really, really good team there who taught me a lot. I think, in my kind of practical job, you learn more when you're out doing the job, and you're putting fence posts in the rain, and you're dragging trees around, and actually dealing with all the sorts of things that you do in an actual job. That's when you really learn and understand it. And they were fantastic at bringing me on, and out of that it just so happened that a ranger retired at Buchan Country Park, which was my first proper job, and I was there for about 9 years, living on site, and that was really important to me because that is in Crawley, where I was born and brought up, and it's where I took some of my first footsteps. So I was managing a country park that had a real meaning for me, and again, there's a lovely team there of people, and really enjoyed that.
So when you say you're managing a country park, what were some of the tasks that you had to do in that job?
Buchan Country Park is a triple SI for ponds and streams and wet woodlands. So there's a lot of management there, particularly focused on dragonfly species, so getting the habitats right. That could be battling invasive species, that could be managing the tree species along there, and the density, the amount of trees that are along the line, trying to let more light into ponds. They also got fantastic heathlands as well. So there's a lot of managing invasive species, native species as well as rhododendron, which is a non-native. You've also got countless young birch trees to pull and get out to maintain that lovely heather landscape, and then there's a lot of woodlands there as well, which is my main sort of passion, if you like, for the countryside now. So everything from giving people great access to the countryside and something to do when they're there, and a bit of information and education when you're there, to maintaining and improving that place for people and for wildlife. And it is just so varied, fencing to, oh God, the list of jobs is just endless, really. I'd encourage people to volunteer in their local country park to find out more, and or any wild space. Get in touch with the wildlife trusts or National Trust or someone like that, and go and experience it for yourselves, because it's incredibly great thing to do for yourself and for the planet, and it's very rewarding.
So Knepp came calling last year, but what was the route from where you were talking about before to here? So
I, after working at local authority, I got a job as a ranger for the National Trust, first at Sheffield Park and Garden in East Sussex, and then after COVID I joined the Surrey Hills team up there, and I was area ranger for a bit, and had a fantastic time at places like Leith Hill and Denby's Hillside, again working with volunteers, giving access to people, but conserving wildlife there, heathlands, woodlands again, and wildflower rich meadows and chalk grassland and things like that, and had a fab time with them. But this job came up and I only live a mile away, so it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. I pretended that I was pretty casual in my interview with Jason. I will consider it, and inside I was chewing his hand off.
I bet you were. Oh goodness. Well, that was a year ago. And so, talking about the role then, for example, in here, what would you be thinking about in your role as ranger and woodsman?
Well, in here, principally, I'm looking at the trees. I'm looking down at the ground. It's very difficult to explain generally, because here at Knepp we are rewilders, and that's about putting natural processes at the forefront. So it's not as much intervention as my previous jobs, where it was all about, as a ranger, getting involved, shaping habitats, allowing spaces for natural processes to take place. Whereas here we're very much like, well, let's try and let it happen as much as possible. So principally with the trees and woods around the rewilding project, I'm looking at things like tree safety. There's also an element of harvesting timber for things like the biomass boiler, for firewood, and also for sawmill timber. There's 190 properties, I think, in total on the estate. Wow. So there's always furniture and beams required and all this kind of stuff. So we don't take more than we need, but we do need to be careful about making sure we have that stuff. Because particularly when it comes to timber, we have a bit of a problem in this country of importing far too much timber from other countries instead of using what we have already in stock around. And it's just wonderful to see that journey from a tree to sawmill timber used on the estate, never left the estate, and being used like traditionally it would have been. But if this was outside of the rewilding project, and on another site, I would be thinking about what tree species we have, what's here already. That's the most important thing. You establish what wildlife you've got, what plant species, what tree species you've got, and then you think about what are the most important factors in that. So here we've got some really nice young oak trees, and it would be fab to give them a bit more space perhaps, and allow them to really branch out. Oaks are open grown species, and of course we love that shape of a tree. If you ask a child to draw a tree, they draw the outline of an oak, don't they, straight up, and then a big cloud on top. And trees like oak trees will only do that if they're given the space to do that naturally or with intervention. So Yeah, that's probably what I would focus on. And of course, oaks are so fantastic for wildlife, aren't they? You know, there's so many species, hundreds of species associated with oak trees and require it as part of their life process for food or shelter or whatever it might be. But yeah, they are king of the woods in this country, definitely.
And so coppicing is part of your job as well. Is that something that you do here?
Yeah, so we did a fantastic session of coppicing last year up in the northern block near Shipley Football Club. Around the corner there's a nice wood there called Wrench's Woodland, and it's an old hazel coppice woodland, and that's predominantly hazel in the understory, and it's got a few oak standards, big trees within that woodland. And with the use of volunteers, lovely people came out and we did a lot of coppicing in there, and we were coppicing for products. So the material that we were getting out of that wood has been used at the market garden, it's been used in the walled garden, a lot of it was used in stalk nesting material because we've got a population of non-flying storks that needed to have a helping hand to make nests, which they did do this year, which was very exciting. We also wanted to set some timber aside for making some charcoal at some stage as well, which is a very exciting thing to do. We're very keen for that.
So coppicing, if you can explain for people who might not be familiar with the term.
Yeah. So coppicing is a very ancient form of woodland management. People have been coppicing for thousands of years. You know, Neolithic man discovered that if you cut some trees down, then they'll pop back up and they'll regrow. And it also prolongs the life of the tree as well. So if you're just thinking about it from a what can we get from coppicing, you get a timber product out of it, depending on how long you leave it for, depends on how long, what kind of timber you'll get out. You know, if you leave it longer, you'll get a bigger crop. If you have a shorter cycle, then you'll get smaller stuff for basket weaving or what have you. But you know, obviously the bigger it is, the more it's used for things like shipbuilding back in the days and things like that. So coppicing is a fantastic habitat management tool as well. You are cutting the tree down to the ground and you're allowing it to regenerate back up with fresh young growth, and what that does is that lets sunlight into the woodland floor, and that sparks and that opens up a seed bank with all these wonderful wildflowers and foxgloves and red campion and things like that, bluebells of course, pop up, and you're providing a wonderful habitat in there and a lovely cycle. And as those trees, those young trees, that regrowth grows back up, it forms a real thick layer, fantastic for nesting birds, so you know, blackbirds of course, but also some of the interesting things like warblers and blackcaps, things like that. So it's a really old management tool which benefits the person coppicing and also the wildlife in that wood as well. So it's fantastic. Some of our oldest trees are coppice trees. They can go on for such a long time because of coppicing.
Well, it's really interesting how you're saying that, you know, it is a practice now considered to be really good for biodiversity as well. So you were touching on it before a little bit about how your job differs because you're at Knepp than it has before. So what would you say the main differences are in terms of what Knepp's doing in terms of the woodland than what you were maybe doing beforehand?
Well, I think the main differences here is it's so much more like what our natural world would have looked like a few hundred years ago compared to reserves, nature reserves and parks that I've worked on before, which aren't. They're either parklands that were planted by people like Capability Brown, or they're heathlands that involve a lot of intensive management to keep going because of the lack of things like grazing herbivores. You know, these longhorn cattle that are behind us are doing a fantastic job of creating space for nature, whether they're, in the wet making big areas of muddy clay that then in the spring gives an opportunity for wildflowers seed to come up and see that diversity in the flora, or they're munching on stuff, keeping stuff low, eating some of the young trees that would grow up and form what we call secondary woodland, and they could be quite crowded woodlands that don't give things like the oaks the space to grow up. They're keeping that competition down, and that's a big part of what we have here and what's different, but also the mindset here about, really, do we have to get involved? Do we have to go and do that? If the space is big enough, if the right components are in the right place, will it not do that itself? Will it not work itself out? And oftentimes it does, and I think that's just brilliant, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Did you ever have to think and stop yourself from doing something?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. I've spent 15 years getting involved, being that factor as a part of a wildlife habitat, and making visible, clear changes and trying to get somewhere to A to B. particularly with things like high level stewardship schemes and things that are, the successes are measured. Have you removed certain amount of this? Is that looking like that? Do you have that percentage of wildflowers? Do you have all these key species? Are they here? Are they registered? Things like that. It's the onus is on you getting in there and getting involved, and to have that pressure removed and be like, okay, well, what do we think is best and what's going to work, and is really powerful, and it really is a massive weight off your shoulders. You could be quite nervous as a site manager to try and get somewhere into a favourable condition or meet the success criteria of a scheme or a plan. Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time. I walk past trees and I think, oh yeah, I could do with a thin. Oh no, hang on, no, don't do that. Put the chainsaw back, and things like that. And so there's a personal adjustment, and that I always knew that was going to be part of the challenge as well. But I'm enjoying it, and I'm learning all the time, and that's a really, really important part of it for me. And for so many others, you never know everything about the countryside and the natural world. You're always learning. There's always a bit more. There's always new stuff being found out, and that's just part of the delight, really.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, what are your favourite parts of the job and the hardest parts?
Hardest part, probably putting wet chainsaw trousers on from the day before in the winter. That's always a bit of a tough one. But I think the most rewarding parts is going to be spring, isn't it? That bit where wildlife and trees wake up for the year ahead, the season ahead. You start getting your migrating birds coming in. You hear your first chiff-chaff, your first turtle dove, things like that. You just have a smile on your face, and it's like all the hard work through autumn and winter is worth it. I've got it now. But that's not to say I don't enjoy autumn and winter. I do. I am a woodland management geek, and I do enjoy it. And that is the time of year that we get stuck into woods, because wildlife is either migrated or it's dormant, not nesting, things like that. That's when you shape your woodlands and your habitat. So that's where the really good fun work for me happens, is in autumn and winter. But that's not to say that I don't enjoy putting the tools down in spring and summer and getting on with other stuff.
You mentioned the birds there, but you do love to record birdsong sometimes.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Sometimes it works. It all came from my dad, who's got a real passion for sound. He's always worked in sound, and he got me a microphone because I spend all my time, oh, that's a nice sound, that's nice. And then I started recording natural sounds, whether that's water, whether that's bird song, or just the crunch of frosts and stuff like that. I just love it, and you hear things so differently through a microphone. It's so much more sensitive than your own ear, and to hear that played back, it's fantastic. It's like going from 2D to 3D, isn't it? All of a sudden you're really immersed in it. So I have this incredible backlog of recordings on my computer that one day I will get around to posting and putting up online, but there's a few stuff out there. But dawn chorus is particular wonderful thing.
And you've recorded Nightingales here.
Absolutely, yes. No, that was first on my list of things to record when I joined Knepp, and had tremendous success with that. I was really, really pleased. Heard nightingales in a real thicket of blackthorn and hawthorn. Set the microphone up, go off, have a cup of tea, come back and really hope that it started singing again, and it did.
I listened to it and it's beautiful.
Glad you like it. It's it's a really wonderful bird song to hear. They're fantastic creatures.
Well, they're quite rare, aren't they, nightingales?
Absolutely, yeah, they are rare. But they're coming back in places like Knepp, and surrounding sites as well. I've spoken to quite a few people in the surrounding area, and they're hearing more and more nightingales, which is phenomenal. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. So, coming to your love of trees then.
Yes.
Where did this love of trees come from?
I'm not really sure where it started or how it started. There's something wonderful about trees, and I think everyone loves trees, really. Everyone's very passionate about trees, even if you don't know what species it is or, where it fits in the landscape or habitat that you're in. There's something about humans and trees that goes back thousands and thousands of years. We have this fondness for them, and it's just like another world. They're on a completely different timeline to us. Instead of talking decades, you're talking centuries, if not millennia. And the trees that you plant now, particularly things like oak trees and sweet chestnuts, they could be here in 900 years plus time. Yeah. And that's crazy, isn't it? It's epic. It's a hell of a life cycle, isn't it?
So what are your favourite trees then?
Oh, it depends. It depends on the time of year for me. I think it's wonderful seeing those new shoots on the hazel coppice that you coppiced in winter. That's always an exciting time. It's a bit like planting seed and seeing it germinate. And it's always a bit of a relief as well that the trees you've coppiced do come back. I think in times like the middle of summer, to see an enormous veteran oak tree in full canopy is something else, like the Knepp oak, for example. That is just an incredible tree. And then as you move into winter, you can actually see the depth of the trees. Once the leaves have come off, you can, in a broadleaf woodland, you can really see the scale of trees, and you can appreciate the architecture of trees, the nooks and crannies of something like an ancient sweet chestnut, all the twists and gnarly bark and cavities and everything that's going on in that tree, you can really appreciate. So the answer is I don't have one, really, but,
fair enough. You volunteer for, as I mentioned, the Ancient Tree Forum, so I was going to say then, how would you identify an ancient versus a veteran tree, and what is the difference between those?
It's a really good question, and it's a really tough question. I think even the Ancient Tree Forum is still trying to define it.
Right.
It's tricky because what we're dealing with, really, what we're looking for is veteran features, and a tree that's only 20, 30 years old can have veteran features, things like loose bark and cavities and dead wood in the canopy and things like that, and hollows and stuff like that. So what we're looking at is a selection of features in a tree that we could call it veteran or ancient. And of course all different trees are on different timescales. So a sweet chestnut or an oak, like we say, could live 900 years plus, but your apple tree's not. Right. So do we condemn the apple tree to never make it to veteran tree status? Because that wouldn't be fair, and it's not right either. Fruit trees are fantastic because they do have short life cycles. They actually provide things like dead wood and loose bark much quicker. So things like noble chafer beetle you'll find in orchards, and you won't find it in an oak tree. It would be wrong of us to say all trees have got to get to 800 years before we consider them. But
okay, so it's specific to the tree when you call it an ancient or a veteran.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
So if you're talking, you say about sweet chestnut and oaks, what would be the standard age for a sort of ancient one of those?
Oh, there's a lovely buzzard going over the top there. A standard age?
Yeah, kind of when they would start being considered an ancient.
I'd say anything from sort of 200 years plus, really.
Right,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
But then what you're saying about an apple tree, that would be, what would the lifespan of that be?
Oh, it depends on your type of apple tree, but I'd say it would start giving you sort of veteran features after about sort of 30, 40 years.
Yeah, so it's a real difference.
Absolutely, yeah. It's completely different, completely different. And so each tree, needs to have its own sort of, you need to have a look at it and assess it and appreciate the features rather than the age, I'd say.
Yeah, okay. So what about a beech tree? How old would it be to be an ancient or veteran beech tree?
Well, I mean, there's no strict rule on it, but you start seeing veteran features on beech trees from about 100 years plus, really. Okay. Really dense timber on them, and they grow fabulous shapes as well. But again, they can live for hundreds of years, so you can see really old beech trees in places like Ashdown Forest. Sheffield Park's got some lovely old beech trees. They're just, they're another category of wonderful old trees.
Yeah. So the Knepp oak, I think we've talked about it being at least about 500 years old.
Yeah, around about 500. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, what about some of the other trees in here? I mean, for example, that oak over there. What would you say that would be?
Well, that's probably getting on for about sort of 50 to 80 years old or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not a whopper. Not yet.
One further there, that's a bit older, isn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely a bit older. That's an old hedgerow tree. You can see the blackthorn and hawthorn either side of it clearly in a nice long line. So at some point that would have been a hedgerow, and that would have been your standard tree in there. But that's looking at about sort of 150 to 200 years old or so.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a lovely tree. It's got a nice shape to it, but it's not finished growing yet.
Yeah.
So oak trees spend 300 years growing up, 300 years chilling out, and 300 years plus slowly declining.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So after about 300 years, they'll sort of reach their max height and width, and then they'll start doing other stuff and chilling out for a bit, and then they'll start declining. Maybe they'll put branches down low to stabilise themselves. Maybe they'll drop a few. Maybe they'll start a secondary canopy and reduce the weight from the outside and bring it closer to the trunk, start hollowing out, things like that. They're incredible. Oak trees especially are just amazing.
There's so much to learn, isn't it? You've spent years obviously building up this expertise.
Yeah, well, I'm nothing. I'm fortunate to know quite a few people who know a hell of a lot more than me. So I just follow them around, making notes, listening, asking questions. Keep asking questions. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
It's another nice tree. I'm admiring the tree now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I always also think, it's quite tempting for a tree house, isn't it? Then you damage the tree probably.
Yeah.
So in terms of outside of work, then, you've said that you're a rugby player, but apart from that,
I used to be. Yeah.
Do you have a big sort of outdoorsy life outside of this, or do you find actually that it reminds you too much of work?
No, well, it's interesting. I spend a lot of time outdoors with my wife and my dog. Spend a lot of time walking in places like the seaside. Is definitely a hot spot because I know next to nothing about the ecology and the place there, so I can visit as a sort of naive tourist and really, really relax. I think the problem with managing woods and trees is that after a while you can't stop looking them in with that sort of professional eye.
Yeah.
And that sort of, I wonder what I'd do here. Oh, that tree. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Oh, look, come and have a look at this cavity. And think, oh no, hang on, wait. I'm supposed to be just taking the dog for a walk here.
Yeah.
Definitely go down to the coast. Which we're fortunate to live pretty close to the south coast, and it's a wonderful place to be, especially places like Seven Sisters and Worthing Seafront, places like that. I do like that. And then I've recently taken on an allotment, which is my way of getting outdoors and not having anything like work near me, which is nice. So I am about to launch a bombardment of questions to our market gardeners down at Swallows there for hints and tips, because I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with that.
Have you got anything on it at the moment?
There's a plum tree and an apple tree.
Okay.
In fact, I had some of the plums off it last night and they're fantastic. So I did bring a small punnet of those for the market gardeners this morning with a little note saying expect questions.
I like the bribes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, bribery works really well around here. Looking forward to getting stuck into that. But being outdoors is really important to me. I've got a stand-up paddle board this year, which I've only fallen off once so far, which is good news. Anything I can do that's new and exciting outdoors is just a big plus.
So why is it so important to you? Well, how does it make you feel?
I think it's peaceful. I think it's natural, isn't it, to spend time outdoors. I think it's really important part of being human is to associate yourself with the natural world and with everything that's going on in today's crisis, and it's a nature crisis that we're in. Really important to recognise it and to find out what you can do about it and to act on that. And I find that going into nature and going into wild spaces encourages me, refuels my passion, and lets me get back out there and do some work to try and tackle those things. And at the same time, as recharging my batteries for going back to work, I just find it immensely easy to relax outside. And I'm not the sort of person who sits on the sofa for long periods of time. I just enjoy being out and about, and I relax by doing things as well. So even if the doing thing is just going for a walk, I find that much more relaxing than sitting down. And like I say, I just think it's in us to just be outdoors. It's fantastic for your mental health, for your physical health, and just great for your soul, isn't it, really?
So how do you think the outdoors has impacted your life, Tom?
I think it's shaped it entirely. Even from being a child and just enjoying being out on a bike in a forest somewhere, or just being up to mischief in the forest. I did actually end up working with people later in my career who managed the forest I used to get up to mischief in, so I had to apologise profusely and make them coffee for a few years. But I think it's just everything to me. If I can continue working in it and spending all my time outdoors, then that'll be a really good life led, I think. Just being involved as well is fantastic, and having the opportunity, and I'm really lucky to do this, is get other people involved as well. A big part of my role is working with volunteers. If I can give them access to the countryside, to nature, and to be a part of it, I know that it's great for them, and that's a really that's a privilege to do, really.
Spreading the message.
Absolutely, and then in turn they're also spreading that message. So it's like it's a thing. If you can introduce others and they can introduce others, there'll be a long chain of people who are passionate about the outdoors and are aware of its importance, and that's fantastic.
Tom, who are the 3 people who have inspired your outdoors life?
Oh, well, that's a really easy question to answer. Thank you so much for asking that one. That's a tricky one. Okay, well, I think firstly it would be my dad. All the time, because like I said earlier, I'm not from a rural background. It's not like my dad's a farmer or anything like that. He used to work for local authority, and when I was looking through these courses like countryside management, he backed me 100% and said, do something that you're passionate about. He never said, make sure you earn lots of money, or you can have a big house or anything like that. It was all about find something that you're really passionate about and go do. And he supported me through that and helped me, move to Aberystwyth University and supported me through, being an apprentice after coming back from, university and all that kind of stuff, and was always there encouraging me to do stuff. So he's definitely up there in that three. My wife inspires me loads. She hears me moan all the time. She hears me come back with aches and pains and, oh my God, it's dark, and I start in the dark and I finish in the dark, and all that kind of stuff. But she encourages me and motivates me all the time. So she's a huge part of that for me. And then my third one, and this is a bit tongue-in-cheek, is I used to watch as a kid a lot of Monica the Glen, the TV show.
I used to love that
I
show.
loved it, honestly. I couldn't get enough of it. And there's a character called Golly in that, and I always thought, oh, I could be Golly. Not as miserable as his character was, but I thought, yeah, that'd be a cool job. And I think I'm the closest that I could get to that now. So yeah, thanks, Golly. That'd be Golly from Monica the Glen. Oh, terrible. What a nightmare.
Tom, tips then. Where in the country do you think people can find the best ancient trees, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think the two hotspots for me, my personal favourites are Petworth Park in West Sussex, which is a stone's throw away from here. They've got some of the most beautiful oak and sweet chestnut veteran trees that I've ever seen. They are marvellous to behold. They are fantastic. I strongly recommend you get down there. And then, of course, Knepp has some fantastic oak trees here. We are surrounded in big oak trees, like the Knepp oak, which you can see on the red walk if you're visiting us. The other place I would encourage people to go to, if they can, of course, is Epping Forest, which is wonderful place with some fantastic oak trees in there and beech trees and things like that. It's a nice one.
Yeah, not too far from London as well for people who live there.
No. Easily hop on a train and bus, I think. I don't know London very well.
Yeah, we definitely can. Yeah.
I'm making it up.
So what are the trees in Epping Forest that you particularly like?
I saw some fantastic oak trees. I was there on a course with the Ancient Tree Forum looking at tree architecture a few months ago. We were looking at behavioural growth behaviours of trees and the different models that different species fit into in different times of their life cycles and stuff. And it opened a window to look at trees slightly differently, which is fantastic. But just, I think it'd be the oaks there that were marvellous. That were just, fantastic trees. And it's such an old site there that you could sort of look down a line of these old trees, and sort of the romantic in you could look down this path and think, who's walked down here? Who's been here before? Who's touched this tree? And what kind of history and what kind of stories could these trees tell if they could talk? Oaks at Epping, nice one.
And then how about resources for people who want to learn more about particularly ancient and veteran trees? Definitely
Ancient Tree Forum. Have a look at their website. There's loads. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, there are local groups that you can join walks on. Obviously Sussex here, but places like Cornwall got really active groups. If you go on the website, you can see all the subdivisions and you can join a walk near you. And those walks are really accessible. They're really friendly, informal opportunities to go and ask people questions. It's all about generating discussion and having these fantastic communications about ancient trees, veteran trees. Everything from what are they to what makes it good to how do we look after this specific tree? What could we do better? What is going well with this specific tree? So really get on that Ancient Tree Forum website, and then of course you've got great people like the Woodland Trust as well to get in touch with, and a lot of this information is free to you on the internet as well, so it won't cost a lot of money to get in there and have a look. Second-hand bookshops are full of tree books as well, which is where I can be found sometimes, in the tree section. So yeah, just pick up a book, pick up your phone or your tablet or whatever, get onto the websites and start browsing, and you'll see opportunities there to get involved and to learn more. And there's never a bad time to learn more about trees.
Well, I've learnt a lot from you today about trees and of Knepps.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and also the walk around Knepp, because
You're very
it's
welcome.
been a beautiful walk. We've seen so much wildlife, beautiful trees, and I think we're going to finish our walk by going around and going back onto the orange route, are we?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll jump
Yeah.
back on the orange route and we'll go across the river, across the bridge. I'll show you the river restoration project and some new trees that have been planted as part of a trout project and things like that. There's quite a lot to see on the way back, actually.
Oh, it's a very special day. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.